Dragged from the icy river by a Mandan warrior, Sarah Blackwood awakens between life and death, and between two worlds. What began as a rescue soon becomes something far more powerful, challenging everything she thought she knew about survival, belonging, and love. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The frigid waters of the Missouri River rushed with unforgiving force as Sarah Blackwood clung desperately to a floating piece of wagon debris. The spring of 1845 had brought unusually heavy rains to the Dakota Territory, transforming the normally manageable river into a raging torrent. Her hands, numb from the cold, were losing their grip on the splintered wood as her consciousness began to fade. The wagon train she had been traveling with from Pennsylvania had attempted to ford the river at what their guide had assured them was a safe crossing. He had been catastrophically wrong. Sarah's thoughts drifted to her family. Her parents and younger brother all swept away before her eyes when their wagon overturned. The screams, the panic, the struggling horses, all were becoming distant memories as the cold penetrated her bones. Her white dress, now muddied and torn, billowed around her in the water like a surrendering flag. "I'm coming to you, Mother," she whispered, her lips blue and trembling. As her eyes began to close, she thought she saw movement on the riverbank, a figure diving into the water. But surely that was just her dying mind playing tricks on her. Then she felt strong arms around her waist, pulling her from the river's deadly embrace. Through half-closed eyes, she glimpsed the determined face of a man with copper skin and dark eyes filled with concern. His long black hair was tied back, revealing high cheekbones and a strong jawline. He wore buckskin leggings and carried a knife at his waist. "Breathe. You're safe now," he said in accented but clear English as he laid her on the sandy riverbank. Sarah coughed violently, expelling river water from her lungs. The man knelt beside her, his expression stoic but watchful. Behind him she could make out several other figures, men and women with similar features watching from a respectful distance. My family," she managed to gasp. "The others." The man shook his head solemnly. "You are the only one we found alive. The river has taken the rest." Sarah felt a fresh wave of despair crash over her. She was alone in a strange, wild territory, the sole survivor of a doomed expedition. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. "I am Mato, of the Mandan people," the man said, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. "You will come to our village until you are strong again." Sarah wanted to protest, to insist they search for survivors, but exhaustion and grief overwhelmed her. She had heard tales of the Mandan tribe, relatively peaceful farmers who lived in earthen lodges along the river, but frontier prejudices ran deep in her Eastern upbringing. "I can't," she began, but her strength failed her. "The river is still rising," Mato said firmly. "Night comes soon and with it more rain. You will die here." He gestured to a woman who approached with a deerskin water flask. "Drink, then we must go." Sarah hesitated only briefly before accepting the water. Her survival instincts overrode her fear. After drinking, she attempted to stand but found her legs unwilling to support her. Without a word, Mato lifted her in his arms. "My name is Sarah," she offered weakly. "Sarah Blackwood." Mato nodded once in acknowledgement as he carried her away from the river, toward a group of horses tethered among the cottonwood trees. The Mandan woman who had brought the water followed, speaking softly in their native tongue. "Anoki says your spirit is strong," Mato translated. "You fought the river well. Not well enough to save the others," Sarah murmured, tears finally breaking through her shock. "The river takes what it wants," Mato replied. "Even the strongest swimmer cannot fight such waters." Sarah realized with a jolt of dismay that they were leaving the riverbank, leaving any chance of finding other survivors. "Please," she pleaded, "we should look for others." Mato's expression remained unchanged. "My brothers search both sides of the river for 5 miles in each direction. If any live, they will find them." Sarah wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. These people were strangers with no reason to care about the fate of white settlers passing through their territory. Yet this man had risked his own life to save hers. As Mato lifted her onto his horse and mounted behind her, Sarah caught sight of something floating downriver. A chest. her mother's prized possession containing family heirlooms and letters from home. That chest. It was my mother's, she said weakly, pointing. Without hesitation, Mato signaled to one of his companions who rowed downstream, entered the water, and retrieved the floating chest. The small kindness overwhelmed Sarah, and silent tears streamed down her face as they rowed away from the river, away from all she had known, toward an uncertain future among people she had been taught to fear. The journey to the Mandan village took less than an hour, but to Sarah, drifting between consciousness and dark oblivion, it seemed both momentary and eternal. She was vaguely aware of Mato's strong arms keeping her secure, of the horse's steady movement beneath them, and of the changing landscape as they traveled from the riverbank through a stretch of prairie toward distant bluffs. "We are here," Mato's voice roused her from her stupor as they approached a settlement unlike anything Sarah had seen before. Dome-shaped earthen lodges formed a loose circle, smoke rising from holes in their centers. Children paused in their play to stare at the approaching party, and women looked up from their tasks, their expressions curious but not hostile. Sarah felt a wave of fear. What would become of her here, alone among people whose language and customs were foreign to her? But as Mato helped her dismount, supporting her weight as her legs threatened to buckle, she realized she had no choice but to trust these strangers who had already saved her life once. "You will stay in my mother's lodge," Mato informed her. "She is a healer and will help you regain your strength." Sarah nodded weakly, clutching her mother's salvaged chest as another Mandan brought it to her. It was all she had left of her previous life, that and the sodden clothes on her back. "Thank you," she whispered, both to Mato and to whatever Providence had seen fit to spare her life when so many others had been lost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she was alive, and for that, she could only be grateful. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's rescue from the river, and spring was giving way to early summer on the Dakota plains. The devastating floods had receded, leaving behind a landscape transformed, muddy expanses gradually yielding to vibrant green growth. Sarah sat outside Ina's lodge, Mato's mother, weaving a basket under the old woman's patient instruction. Her fingers, once soft from a life of relative ease in Pennsylvania, had grown calloused and nimble with new skills. "Good." Ina nodded approvingly, her weathered face creasing with a smile. Despite not sharing a common language, the two women had developed their own form of communication, a mixture of gestures, expressions, and the few Mandan words Sarah had managed to learn. Mato often served as translator when he was present, but he had been absent for several days, leading a hunting party. Sarah glanced toward the village entrance, as she had done countless times since his departure. She told herself it was merely gratitude she felt toward her rescuer, but in her heart, she knew it was more. Mato's steady presence and quiet strength had become a comfort in this strange new world she found herself in. "He returns today," Ina said in halting English, one of the few phrases she had learned to ease Sarah's mind. The older woman's knowing eyes missed nothing. Sarah flushed. "I'm just concerned for everyone's safety," she replied, though Ina couldn't understand her specific words. The Mandan woman simply patted Sarah's hand with a knowing smile. Life in the Mandan village had proven far different from the savage existence Sarah had been led to expect. The people lived in orderly, clean dwellings, cultivated crops, and maintained complex social structures. Their earthen lodges, cool in the heat of day and warm at night, were engineering marvels compared to the drafty cabins of many white settlements. Sarah's integration into the community had not been without challenges. Some villagers kept their distance, distrustful of the white woman in their midst. Children sometimes stared or whispered. But Ina's acceptance had paved the way for others to show kindness, and gradually, Sarah found herself included in daily activities, grinding corn, preparing meals, tending gardens. "Sarah," called Anoki, the young woman who had been present at Sarah's rescue. She approached with a bundle of freshly dyed fabric. "For you." She had picked up more English than Ina, having traded with white settlers before. Sarah accepted the gift, a dress made in the Mandan style but adapted to provide the modesty Sarah was accustomed to. "It's beautiful," she said, touched by the consideration. Her own dress, damaged beyond repair by the river, had been replaced by borrowed clothes that never quite fit right. "You try," Anoki insisted, gesturing toward Ina's lodge. Inside the dim, circular dwelling, Sarah changed into the new garment. The soft buckskin felt strange against her skin, but the dress fit well, a blend of her old world and this new one. When she emerged, Anoki clapped her hands in delight. "Now you look Mandan," she declared, but still Sarah. A commotion at the village entrance drew their attention. The hunting party had returned, men on horseback bringing in several deer and an impressive buffalo. Women and children rushed to greet them, voices raised in celebration of a successful hunt. Sarah's eyes sought and found Mato among the returning hunters. He dismounted gracefully, speaking with several elders before turning in her direction. When their eyes met, Sarah felt a flutter in her chest that both thrilled and frightened her. What future could there possibly be for these feelings? Later that evening, as the village gathered to feast on the fruits of the hunt, Sarah found herself seated near Mato. The central fire cast flickering shadows across his face as he recounted the hunting party's journey for the benefit of the elders. "The buffalo are moving north earlier than usual this year," he explained when he turned to include Sarah in the conversation. "The floods have changed their grazing patterns." "Will that cause problems for the village?" Sarah asked, genuinely concerned for the people who had taken her in. Mato considered her question thoughtfully. "Perhaps. We will need to hunt farther from home or rely more heavily on our crops." He studied her new attire. "You look well, more rested." "Your mother and Anoki have been very kind," Sarah replied. "They gave me this dress today." "It suits you," he said simply. But something in his dark eyes made Sarah's cheeks warm. As the meal concluded, Mato rose. "Walk with me," he said. Not quite a question, but not quite a command either. Sarah followed him away from the central fire, toward the edge of the village where the vast prairie stretched out under a canopy of stars. The night was warm, alive with the sounds of insects and distant coyotes. "I found something while hunting," Mato said, reaching into a pouch at his waist. "I thought you might want it." He handed her a small, tarnished silver locket, her mother's, lost in the river crossing. Sarah gasped, taking it with trembling hands. "Where did you find it?" she asked, voice thick with emotion. "Caught on branches downstream from where you were taken by the water." Mato's face remained impassive, but his eyes held warmth. There was no sign of other survivors. Sarah nodded, grief a dull ache that had become her constant companion. "I've accepted that they're gone," she said softly, opening the locket to reveal tiny portraits of her parents on their wedding day. "Thank you for this. It means more than I can express." They stood in companionable silence, gazing out at the starlit prairie. Finally, Sarah voiced the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What will become of me, Mato? I cannot impose on your people's hospitality forever." Mato turned to face her directly. "Where would you go? The nearest white settlement is many days' journey. The trading post at Fort Clark is closest, but it is no place for a woman alone." "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "I had planned to start a new life in Oregon with my family. Now those dreams are gone, washed away with them. Perhaps new dreams can grow here," Mato suggested, his voice low. "You have learned our ways quickly. The children enjoy your stories. Even the elders have remarked on your willingness to work and learn." Sarah felt a spark of hope at his words. "Do you believe I could truly belong here?" "That is for you to decide," Mato answered. "But know this, you would not be the first white person to choose our way of life over returning to your own people. Some traders have made their homes among us. A few women too." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken, but unmistakable. Sarah looked up at Mato's face, strong and dignified in the starlight. "And what do you want, Mato?" she asked boldly, heart racing. His expression softened slightly. "I want you to be where you choose to be," he said. "But I would not be displeased if that place were here." It was as close to a declaration as his reserved nature would allow. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, not of sorrow this time, but of something like hope. "I need time," she whispered, "to be certain." Mato nodded once, accepting her answer without question. "Time you shall have. Winter comes soon enough, and before the snow falls you must decide. For now, rest and heal." As they walked back toward the village, Sarah felt Mato's hand briefly touch hers, a fleeting contact that sent warmth coursing through her. For the first time since the river had taken her family, she allowed herself to imagine a future that held more than mere survival. It was frightening and exhilarating all at once, like standing at the edge of uncharted territory. That night, as she lay on her sleeping mat in Ina's lodge, listening to the old woman's soft snores, Sarah opened her mother's locket once more. The tiny faces of her parents gazed back at her, a reminder of all she had lost. But as she drifted towards sleep, it was Mato's face that filled her thoughts. His dark, serious eyes, the rare smile that transformed his stern features, the strength in his hands that had pulled her from the river's deadly embrace. "What would you think of him, Mother?" she whispered to the portrait. "What would you say if you knew your daughter was considering a life so different from what you planned for her?" The locket offered no answers, but as Sarah closed it and pressed it to her heart, she felt a strange peace settle over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities. For now, that was enough. As summer gave way to the golden hues of autumn, Sarah found herself fully integrated into the rhythm of Mandan life. The corn and squash in the fields had grown tall under the prairie sun, and harvest preparations were underway throughout the village. Sarah worked alongside the women, her once soft hands now calloused and capable, her skin bronzed by countless hours under the open sky. "Your basket holds more than mine," laughed Anoki as they collected ripened corn. The two young women had formed a close friendship over the months, with Anoki patiently teaching Sarah the Mandan language while improving her own English. "Only because you stop to gossip with everyone who passes," Sarah teased in return, now comfortable enough with the language to attempt simple jokes. Anoki's expression turned mischievous. "I notice Mato walks by our field very often. Perhaps I am not the only one distracted." Sarah felt her cheeks warm, but couldn't deny the truth in her friend's observation. Since their starlit conversation months before, something unspoken had grown between her and Mato. They had not discussed her decision to stay or leave again, but with each passing day, the thought of leaving seemed more impossible to bear. "He is concerned with the harvest, as all are," Sarah deflected, though her eyes involuntarily scanned the village perimeter, where hunters kept watch for potential threats. Anoki snorted in disbelief. "My brother has never shown such interest in corn before. It is you he watches grow and flourish here." Before Sarah could formulate a response, a commotion rose from the village center. Both women straightened, listening to the sudden calls and movement of people. "Visitors," Anoki said, her expression growing serious. "Come." They abandoned their baskets and hurried toward the central gathering area, where a small party of white men had entered the village. Sarah's heart leaped to her throat at the sight of people from her former world. They appeared to be traders, leading pack mules laden with goods, but among them stood a man in a cavalry uniform, an Indian agent, most likely, tasked with maintaining relations between tribes and the encroaching white settlements. The village elders had already formed a reception committee, with Mato among them as one of the few fluent English speakers. His stance was proud but wary. Relations with white authorities were increasingly strained as more settlers pushed into traditional tribal territories. When Mato caught sight of Sarah approaching, something flashed in his eyes. Concern, perhaps even fear. She realized with sudden clarity how her presence might appear to these visitors. A white woman living among the Mandan, dressed in native clothing, speaking their language. The Indian agent noticed her immediately, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "My God," he exclaimed, breaking protocol to step toward her. "Are you being held here, miss? Are you in need of rescue?" Before Sarah could answer, one of the traders gasped in recognition. "It's the Blackwood girl, from that wagon train that was lost crossing the Missouri last spring. We heard everyone perished." All eyes turned to Sarah, standing frozen between two worlds. Mato's face had become an impassive mask, but she could see tension in the set of his shoulders, in the way his hand rested near his knife. "I am Sarah Blackwood," she confirmed, unconsciously straightening her posture, finding her long, unused, proper English. "And I am not in need of rescue, sir. The Mandan people saved me from the river and have shown me nothing but kindness." The Indian agent, a Major Adams by his introduction, studied her with open skepticism. Nevertheless, Miss Blackwood, it is my duty to inform you that a military escort can be arranged to return you to civilization. Your relatives in Pennsylvania have been notified of your probable demise. They would surely be overjoyed to learn of your survival. Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Distant cousins in Philadelphia, her only remaining family, people she barely knew who had shown little interest in her family's westward journey. They were technically her blood, but strangers compared to those who had taken her in, taught her their ways, and become her new family. That is, most considerate, she managed, aware of the entire village watching this exchange. But I have built a life here, the Major frowned. Perhaps we should speak privately, Miss Blackwood. These circumstances are highly unusual, and I must ensure you are speaking freely. Sarah glanced at Mato, whose expression remained carefully neutral, though she knew him well enough now to recognize the storm brewing behind his composed exterior. He would not stop her if she chose to leave. She knew this with certainty, but the thought of departure tore at her heart. There is no need for privacy, she said firmly. I am here by choice, Major Adams. One of the traders, a gruff older man with a tangled beard, spat on the ground. It ain't natural. A white woman living with savages. Begging your pardon, miss, but you've clearly been affected by your ordeal. Stockholm Syndrome, they call it. Anger flashed through Sarah, hot and immediate. These people are not savages, sir. They farm, they build, they maintain complex social structures and spiritual practices. They saved my life when they could have left me to drown. Major Adams held up a placating hand. No one is questioning the, hospitality you've received, Miss Blackwood. But surely you understand that this is not where you belong. I cannot in good conscience leave an unmarried white woman in an Indian village. The implication hung heavily in the air. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, partly embarrassment, partly fury at the assumptions being made. I believe Miss Blackwood has made her position clear. Mato finally spoke, his English crisp and educated, surprising the visitors. She is a guest of our people, free to stay or go as she chooses. The Mandan do not hold prisoners. Major Adams turned his attention to Mato, clearly reassessing the man before him. And you are? Mato, son of Chief Howling Wolf, who leads our council of elders, he replied with dignity. I was the one who pulled Miss Blackwood from the river. Understanding dawned in the Major's eyes as he looked between Sarah and Mato. I see, he said, his tone shifting. Well, this complicates matters. There is no complication, Sarah insisted. I have chosen to remain here. For now, perhaps, Major Adams conceded reluctantly, but our trading party will remain in the area for 3 days camping downriver. Should you reconsider your position, Miss Blackwood, you would be welcome to join us when we depart for Fort Clark. Sarah knew this was the best compromise she would get. Thank you for your concern, Major. The tension gradually dissipated as the visitors' purpose returned to trading. The Mandan were renowned for their corn, which they had cultivated for generations, and the traders were eager to barter for it. Sarah withdrew from the center of attention, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. Later, as twilight painted the prairie in shades of purple and gold, Sarah found herself by the river, not where the tragedy had occurred, but a peaceful bend where the Mandan women often gathered to wash clothes and collect water. She sat on a fallen log, watching the current flow past, symbolic of the choice before her, to be carried back to her old world or to remain in this new one that had claimed her heart. You could go with them. Mato's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach, but she wasn't startled. His presence had become a comfort, expected and welcomed. Sarah didn't turn. Is that what you want? He moved to sit beside her on the log, close but not touching. What I want does not matter. This is about your path. It matters to me, Sarah said softly, finally meeting his gaze. What you want matters greatly to me, Mato. Something in his stoic expression softened. I want you to be where you will not regret being, he said carefully. If you stay because you feel obligated to those who saved you, that is not a good reason. If you leave because others tell you where you belong, that is also not a good reason. And if I stay because my heart is here? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because the thought of returning to a world that suddenly feels foreign to me is more frightening than facing the unknown here. Mato's hand found hers on the rough surface of the log. Then that would be a reason I could honor, he said. His voice, usually so measured and controlled, held a note of vulnerability she had never heard before. But you must be certain. Life here will not always be easy. Our people face challenges from the white settlements, from other tribes, from nature itself. Life is never easy, Sarah replied, thinking of all she had already endured. But it is better faced with those who truly care for you. She turned her hand beneath his, interlacing their fingers. With those you care for in return. Mahto's eyes, dark and serious in the fading light, searched hers. The village already considers you one of us. Ina speaks of you as a daughter. The children follow you for your stories. A rare smile touched his lips. And I would not have you leave. It was as close to a declaration as his reserved nature allowed. But Sarah understood the depth of feeling behind the simple words. In the months she had known him, she had learned to read the emotions Mato rarely expressed openly, the concern in the slight furrow of his brow, the affection in the gentle touch of his hand, the respect in his attentive silence when she spoke. Then I won't, she said simply, certainty settling over her like a warm blanket. This is my home now. These are my people. She squeezed his hand. And you are where my future lies if you'll have me. Mahto's free hand rose to touch her cheek gently, as if she were something precious he feared might break. In our way, we do not speak of such things directly, he said, his voice low. But yes, Sarah Blackwood, I would have you as my wife, if that is your choice. Sarah leaned into his touch, tears of joy springing to her eyes. It is my choice, she whispered. It has been since you pulled me from the river and told me to breathe. As the last light of day faded from the sky and the first stars appeared above the endless prairie, Mato bent his head to hers, their foreheads touching in a gesture of intimacy and commitment. No words were needed in that moment of perfect understanding. Two people from different worlds who had found in each other something worth more than all they had lost. The river flowed on beside them, no longer a symbol of tragedy but of the unstoppable current of life itself, carrying them forward into a shared future neither could have imagined before fate and courage brought them together on its banks. The autumn harvest celebration was in full swing, as the Mandan village marked the successful gathering of crops that would sustain them through the coming winter. Drums beat a steady rhythm, while voices rose in traditional songs of gratitude. Children darted between adults, faces painted for the occasion, caught up in the joy of the moment. Sarah stood at the edge of the central gathering area, watching the festivities with a full heart. 3 days had passed since Major Adams and his trading party had arrived, and tomorrow they would depart downriver toward Fort Clark. The Major had made one final appeal that morning, approaching her as she worked in the communal gardens. "This is your last opportunity, Miss Blackwood," he had said, genuine concern in his weathered face. "Once we leave, your chance to return to your own kind diminishes greatly. Winter comes early to these plains." Sarah had thanked him for his concern, but reaffirmed her decision. "I am with my people now, Major. I wish you safe travels." He had studied her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll inform your cousins in Philadelphia of your survival and your choice. Perhaps in spring they might send word or even journey west themselves." The thought of her distant relatives making such an arduous journey seemed unlikely, but Sarah had simply smiled. They would be welcomed here if they did. Now, watching the celebration, she felt a profound sense of belonging that transcended blood ties and cultural differences. She was dressed in her finest clothes, a beautifully beaded dress Ina and Anoki had helped her create, her mother's locket gleaming at her throat, her hair braided in the Mandan style but with ribbons woven through in a nod to her heritage. "You look lost in thought." Mato's voice drew her attention as he approached, resplendent in his ceremonial attire. As the son of a respected elder, he wore symbols of status, eagle feathers, intricate beadwork, and painted symbols of protection and strength. "Not lost," Sarah replied with a smile. "Found. I was thinking how strange life's path can be. 6 months ago, I was drowning in that river, certain my life was over. Now," She gestured to the vibrant community around them. Mato's usual reserve softened. "Now you prepare to become my wife before the winter snows." There was still a note of disbelief in his voice, as if he couldn't quite trust his good fortune. Their decision to marry had been announced to the village 2 days earlier, met with widespread approval. Even those who had initially been wary of the white woman in their midst had come to respect Sarah's diligence, her willingness to learn their ways, and her genuine affection for their people. Ina had wept with joy, embracing Sarah as a true daughter. Only a few voices had raised concerns, primarily older men who feared repercussions from white authorities for taking one of their women. But Chief Howling Wolf, Mato's father, had silenced such worries. "She chooses freely," he had declared, "and the Mandan have always welcomed those who come to us with open hearts, regardless of where they were born." Major Adams had been formally notified of the impending marriage. His reaction had been a mixture of resignation and lingering concern. "You understand what this means, Miss Blackwood?" he had asked. "In the eyes of white society, such a union is frowned upon. Should you ever wish to return east, you would face significant prejudice." "I understand fully," Sarah had assured him. "But I've seen enough of both worlds now to know where true civilization lies. It is not always where one expects to find it." Now, as Mato took her hand to lead her toward the central fire where the elders waited, Sarah felt a momentary flutter of nervousness, not about her decision, but about the ceremony itself. Despite months of instruction, there were still customs and traditions she was learning. "What if I make a mistake?" she whispered. Mato's dark eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, his version of a reassuring smile. "Then we will laugh, and you will try again. This is not a test, Sarah, it is a celebration." His words calmed her, and together they approached the circle of elders. Chief Howling Wolf sat at the center, his face deeply lined with age and wisdom, his bearing regal despite his advancing years. Beside him sat Ina, who had assumed a position of honor as mother of the groom and adoptive mother of the bride. The drumming intensified as the village gathered around them. Sarah was acutely aware of the traders and Major Adams observing from a respectful distance, witnesses to this unprecedented union. She lifted her chin, meeting their gaze with quiet confidence before turning her attention back to the ceremony at hand. Chief Howling Wolf raised his hands, and silence fell over the gathering. He spoke first in the Mandan language, words of blessing and welcome that Sarah now understood, before switching to English for the benefit of the visitors, and in honor of Sarah's origins. "Today, 2 rivers join to form one stronger current," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Mato, son of my blood, and Sarah, daughter of our hearts, stand before us to bind their lives together in the way of our people." The traditional Mandan wedding ceremony was both simpler and more profound than the elaborate church weddings Sarah had attended in Pennsylvania. There were no written vows, no exchange of rings. Instead, gifts were presented to symbolize the couple's commitment to providing for one another. Mato, offering a finely crafted hunting bow, representing his promise to protect and sustain Sarah. Sarah presenting a beautifully woven blanket, signifying warmth and comfort in the home they would share. As they exchanged these tokens, Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. So much had been lost, yet so much had been gained. She thought of her parents and brother, wishing they could have known this moment, could have seen the man who had captured her heart and the community that had embraced her. "In the tradition of my father's people," Sarah said when it came time for her to speak, her voice clear despite her emotion, "a bride carries something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue." She touched her mother's locket at her throat. "This is my old, my connection to those I have lost." She indicated the dress she wore. "This is my new, a symbol of the life I have found." She gestured to the ribbon Anoki had lent her for her hair. "This is borrowed from my sister of the heart." Finally, she revealed a small blue bead sewn into the cuff of her sleeve. "And this is blue, the color of the river that both took and gave. Took my old family, gave me my new one." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. Even Major Adams appeared moved by her words, his earlier disapproval softening into something like respect. Chief Howling Wolf nodded in acknowledgement of her tribute, then continued with the ceremony. Mato and Sarah were wrapped together in a single buffalo robe, symbolizing their unity, while the chief spoke blessings over them. When he finished, they drank together from a ceremonial cup, sealing their commitment. "You are now one before our people and the Great Spirit," Chief Howling Wolf declared. "What has been joined together, let no one tear asunder." The words, echoing the Christian ceremony of Sarah's upbringing, brought fresh tears to her eyes. Mato's hand found hers beneath the buffalo robe, his strong fingers interlacing with her own, in a gesture that needed no translation. The drums resumed their joyful beating as the community erupted in celebration. The buffalo robe was removed, and Sarah and Mato were led to places of honor beside the fire, where a feast awaited. Even the traders joined in, awkward at first, but gradually warming to the genuine hospitality of the Mandan people. As night fell and the stars appeared overhead, Sarah found a moment of quiet with her new husband away from the continuing festivities. "Are you happy?" Mato asked, his usual reserve giving way to a vulnerability she rarely glimpsed. Sarah reached up to touch his face, her heart so full she could barely speak. "More than I ever thought possible," she whispered. "When you pulled me from that river, you didn't just save my life, Mato. You gave me a new one better than I could have imagined." He covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "And you have given our people something precious. Hope that different worlds can come together in peace." Sarah leaned against his solid strength, gazing up at the vast prairie sky. "Do you think it can last? This peace between our worlds?" Mato was silent for a moment, ever thoughtful. "I do not know what the future holds," he admitted. "More white settlers come each season. Change is inevitable. But what matters is that we face it together, not as Mandan and white, but as one family, one people." In the distance, Sarah could see Major Adams preparing to depart for his camp downriver. He caught her eye and offered a respectful nod, not quite approval but acknowledgement of her choice. She returned the gesture, knowing he would carry word of this union back to the world she had left behind. "Tomorrow they leave," she murmured, "and our life truly begins." "Our life began the moment you decided to breathe," Mato reminded her, echoing his words from the riverbank months before. "Everything since has been a gift." Sarah smiled, remembering those first words he had spoken to her, words that had pulled her back from the brink of surrender. "Breathe. You're safe now," he had said, and she had believed him, trusted him, even then. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah leaned into her husband's embrace, secure in the knowledge that she had found not just safety, but belonging, not just survival, but love. The river that had nearly claimed her life had instead carried her to a new beginning, a new family, a new home. And as the first snow of winter began to fall gently around them, Sarah took a deep breath of the crisp evening air, filled her lungs with the promise of all that was to come, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.